And good morning, everyone. We're coming to you just a little bit late because it is the gathering, and there's always at least one little technical thing that kind of goes at some point. And our technical thing was just before we came and saw you here today. So now everything's set up and we're off and running. I'm Chris Lehman, founding director of the Educator Collaborative, and we are so happy to have you here for our 15th biannual, the Ed Collab gathering. It's number 15 and we still are having bugs in the system, but now we should be up and ready to go. I'm going to give you a few brief announcements here before we get started, and then I will pass it over to Mike shortly. So a few things. If this is your very first gathering with us, if it's the first time that you have been here, the way that you will join is to go to our website. You're likely on there now, or you could also follow us on Twitter. And from the website, you'll see a list of all the sessions. The sessions happen every hour on the hour. We're in the opening right now, and then soon we'll go to session 1. When you go to that drop-down menu, you'll just click on the link, and that will take you to that particular session. During the pandemic, our opening and closing keynotes are live, and then all of our sessions during the day have been pre-recorded. However, all of our presenters are following along on Twitter and on Instagram right with you using the hashtag #TheEdCollabGathering. You can also find the Twitter handles of our presenters right below inside of their bios. So just head over there, you'll find them, and then you can tag our presenters as well. The Ed Collab gathering is totally free, no registration. It is a day that is our gift to literacy educators around the world. Hi, we're glad that you're here. And because of that, because you don't pay any registration, because you've never, ever, ever had to ever travel to us to see our conference, it's always been online, although now that's old hat for all of us. We're on Zoom constantly. I feel your pain, but because we've always been totally free and you never have to come to us, what we've always done since the beginning is asked you to pay the joy forward. And so on your screen right there, you'll see today's adopted charities. Mike Curato, who is our opening keynote, will be starting in just a few moments. He's adopted the Trevor Project and Camp 10 Trees. And the closing keynote, which is myself, Dr. Carrie Orange Jones, and Elizabeth Lacey Schonenberger, we have adopted Stop AAPI Hate. If you click on our where is it? Adopted charities. I have to move that arrow over. If you click on, boop, there, adopted charities, or you click on any of the images on our banner, or look for tweets throughout the day, that will give you more information about why all of us selected those particular charities today and the ways that you can donate to them. When you click on the link on our page, it will take you directly to our directly to the donation page for each of those charities. So you can find all of that right there, and we'll talk about them more throughout the day. Lots of other announcements, but I want to hurry up and get us over to Mike. And so just a few things to say. First, number one, if you don't watch the Amber Ruffin show, you should. Her show is on NBC. It also is on the Peacock app, which is a weird app that nobody knows about. But if you go to the Peacock app, you can find it there. And Amber Ruffin, in a recent episode, she said this to the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. And I'm going to read what she said verbatim, but you can see her say it there much better than I will. But she said this to our Asian American and Pacific Islander brothers and sisters and community. We hate this. It's not right. Your feelings are valid. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve to be safe. And we love you. Our Asian American and Pacific Islander educator communities give so much to this amazing profession that we're in. We have been pushed to think about book choice. We have been pushed to think about the role of Asian American identity in adopted families. We've been pushed to disrupt text. We've been pushed to think about our students and our classrooms differently. We've been pushed to read. We've been pushed to think, all because amazing people in this community give to our community as educators and as authors. And right now, this community is in pain. And what we need to do, as those of us outside of the community, is we need to not just sit and wait for the next emergency to pop up, but instead we need to be active and involved. I want to talk to one other community for a moment too, our transgender youth community. I have something different to say to all of you. Adults that are trying to take your humanity away are bullies. They are people who don't understand the strength and beauty that it takes for you to be who you are. Adults that are trying to take your ability to play sports or use a bathroom or do all of the everyday human things that you do all of the time without them ever around are bullies. They are people that are trying to use policy to harm you. They are awful adults. They're not acting like adults, and we're not going to stand for it. And so any of us outside of communities that are in harm, it's up to us to not just wait for the next emergency, but to continue to learn and connect. So just a very brief thing to say. When there's a fire, we call emergency workers, we call 911, we call the fire department, and they come. We ask the people who already know how to do it best to do the thing with and for us. That's why we've adopted some of these charities today. Each one of these charities and plenty others, and Mike was saying earlier that he has some more resources he'll share as well. These are just a few of the charities that are already connected in communities that are currently in pain and have been doing the work to help the people in them. So the very first thing we can do is support them, is to call 911 when there's an emergency and help. But here's the other thing. We don't all sit around waiting for fires to happen. We're not like, oh, I wonder if some random fire might happen today. I wonder if my house will get burned down. I wonder what might take place. No, instead, we do something about it proactively. We put things in place to make sure that we can do our very best to fight a fire before a fire ever starts. Or if a fire starts happening, we work on that. And here's the great news about that for all of us as literacy educators. The best news of all is that it's all literacy. Engaging with the public is literacy. Filling classrooms with resources is literacy. Advocating for new policies through the way that we talk, the way that we write, the way that we tweet, that's literacy. And teaching children to not play with matches or teaching children about the humanity of others so that they don't grow up to be adults that bully, that's literacy too. And the best thing that we can do for communities in pain is to use our power as literacy educators and use the power of the kids that are in front of us. And together, we can do something about it before it even happens. So yes, we need to make sure that the first place we go when there is an emergency are the people at the front lines of it. But we also can make a choice that we're not going to wait around for the next emergency to happen. And we as literacy educators have the gift of doing that. Today's gathering, like many gatherings, is a collection of educators who are trying to do just this, who are trying to find ways to use the power of our literacy in order to make progress that helps to save us from future emergencies and protect the communities that we love. And so it's a real honor this morning that we can invite our keynote speaker, Mike Curato here. Mike is the author of tons of books. I think there's maybe 5 or 6 little Elliots right now. Mike can correct that. But there's lots of little Elliots. He's an illustrator of other amazing titles with Trudy Ludwig, The Power of One, Worm Loves Worm, with Margarita Engel, all the way to Havana. His incredible graphic novel, Flamer, which I've been reading up until today, and then I finished it last night, and that was not good timing because I was up very, very late finishing it because I couldn't put it down. It has won numerous awards. Mike also has a brand new book that he's illustrated that's coming out any second now, The Sherry Godmother, and there's been lots of buzz online around that as well too. Mike has adopted for us today the Trevor Project and Camp 10 Trees. So while you are listening, if at any point which will happen almost immediately. But if at any point you feel inspired, please make sure you go over to our charity page. And instead of paying what you would pay for registration or lunch or coffee or anything else, pay that forward to groups that are doing the work to support communities. Before I pass it to Mike, one thing that he did ask out of respect to all of you in the audience and knowing the many experiences that we bring to today, there is a content warning. At one point in Mike's presentation, there will be discussion of self-harm and suicide, and Mike said that he'll bring that up one more time. So just be aware of that as his presentation comes on. So Mike, without further ado, I'll pass this over to you. And thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Thanks so much for having me today, Chris. And hello, everyone out there who's making it all happen. And I really appreciate your message, Chris, addressing the AAPI community, which I consider myself a part of. And I am not wearing that hat today in my presentation, but I think it's important to point out intersectionality and how we can, as an individual, be many things. And so something that I'm going to be talking about today is one of my other identities, I guess. So I'm going to share my screen here. Here we go. My name is Mike Curato. I am an author and an illustrator of books for youth. And I wanted to start out my presentation today by acknowledging that Black Lives Matter. And just to reinforce Chris's warning, there is some content that includes self-harm and suicide ideation. Something that I wanted to talk about today is being queer. I have been out for a while now. Cat's out of the bag. If you've read some of my books like Flamer or Worm Loves Worm. And I'm not here today to teach you about queer culture or teach people how to be gay or anything like that. I'm here to advocate for queer LGBT students. For some of you, this might all be old news, and for some, there could be some new things to consider. And for those of you without much exposure with queer culture, or for people who have discomfort speaking about LGBTQ+ topics with their students, I ask for your patience and your openness. Something that I have heard in my time around as an author from some educators is there aren't any kids like that in my school. And I am here to tell you today that that is incorrect. What you're really telling me when you say that is that you don't work in a school environment in which students feel safe to be out. It also says that there are students who could be LGBTQ and not even know it because they've had no exposure to other options. And this is especially harmful because when those students come face to face with their inner truths, they will be ill-equipped with how to handle it, much like I was. Because I was that kid. Oh, and all my slides are out of order. Great. Please bear with me 1 second. Here we go. Oh, I'm so sorry. I worked on this for so long and I thought it was perfect. But that's okay.
I mean, we completely messed up the live stream at the start, so
You
it's
know, you just gotta
the
get
good
into it.
the good news is we are amongst hundreds of educators, and this is exactly what we go through every day, so we're good.
I also thought I was advancing the slides while I was talking, and apparently I wasn't. So, you know, some of us we're just trying to find our way. As I was saying, back to me, I was that secret student in the classroom. And I always knew there was something a little bit different about myself, aside from being obsessed with art and picture books and comic books. And I was really lonely. I felt like really not seen or understood. And I was bullied a lot and teased because I didn't fit typical gender norms. I can be very effeminate. I don't really play sports, which is kind of it puts you know, a boy in a certain box or not let into another one. And I got through it, but it was really difficult. And I made this book, Flamer. You may have heard of it. It's a young adult graphic novel, because it's the book that I wish that I had when I was a 14-year-old kid. I was really out of my element. I went to Catholic school till 8th grade, and then I went to public school my freshman year of high school, and I didn't know how to dress myself. I was really awkward. I didn't get social cues and stuff like that. And so this book is about Aiden Navarro, who's very similar to the kid that I was. He's a chubby Filipino white mixed kid. He's away at scout camp the summer before high school. And, you know, he's juggling friendships and dealing with bullying and dealing with body issues and questions about religion and racism, all while coming to terms with his sexual identity. And I wanted to share this passage just because it pretty much sums up what I was going through as a teenager. And Aiden is thinking to himself, I know I'm not gay. Gay boys like other boys. I hate boys. They're mean and scary, and they're always destroying something or saying something dumb or both. We learned at school how bad homosexuality is. It's a sin. Gay people do bad things. And I'm not a bad person. I try to do good all the time, so I couldn't be gay. So Aiden really is struggling to find his place in the world. And when we're constantly told that there's something fundamentally wrong with us, or we don't see ourselves in books or on screen, we start to believe the lie that we don't belong here. And, you know, it's one thing to try to protect a child against bullying and outside forces. But what do you do to protect someone from their own inner demons? And something that I share in the afterword of this book, because this is a work of fiction and it is semi-autobiographical, but something that is lifted right from the pages of my own memory is one time when I was at a scout camp the summer before high school, I knelt in a chapel with a knife against my wrist because I was literally scared to death of what awaited. And I thought, if I don't kill myself, maybe someone else will. But I came through that, and I'm here, and I want to be a voice for someone who can't say that out loud right now. And I'm sharing my own story because I want you to be able to put a face on that kid. And now I'm going to share some really sobering statistics with you. Well, this isn't a sobering statistic. This is just, oh, this slide was in the right place before. Gosh. Anyway, 5.6% of US adults identify as LGBT. And of that percentage, almost half are bisexual, about a quarter are gay, over 11% are lesbian, over 11% are transgender, and 3% prefer a different term like queer. And I just want to make a note that transgender is an identity, not an orientation. And we'll talk about more of that later. But I just like to share that to clarify that you can be transgender and one of those other terms. So if you do the math, that's about 1 in 20 people are LGBTQ. And so you can do the math, how many students and faculty are in your school. Here are the sobering statistics. Hate crimes based on sexual orientation represent 16.7% of hate crimes, the third largest category after race and religion. The report also shows an uptick in gender identity-based hate crimes, rising from 2.2% in 2018 to 2.7% in 2019. Last year, 44 trans and or non-binary people were murdered in the US. 79% of those people were people of color. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people ages 10 to 24. LGBT youth seriously contemplate suicide at almost 3 times the rate of heterosexual youth. In a national study, 40% of transgender adults reported having made a suicide attempt, and 92% of those people reported having attempted suicide before the age of 25. 1 out of 6 students nationwide, grades 9 through 12, seriously considered suicide in 2016. Each episode of LGBT victimization, such as physical or verbal harassment or abuse, increases the likelihood of self-harming behavior by 2.5 times on average. So that's quite a lot. And I'm sharing all this because it's just important to know. It's important to have those statistics, and those are just statistics that have been reported, and they're polls. So we don't know what those numbers could actually be. Those could be, you know, those are a guesstimate to bear in mind. So again, I am here today to make an appeal, to ask you to advocate for all youth, and that includes queer youth. And I think it's important also to know that many kids don't realize they're queer until they're older, but that's not a reason not to teach about it. So something that I also wanted to point out is avoiding the single narrative. You know, I kind of talked about my single narrative earlier. well, I'm going to share a little bit more about it in a second, but there's this amazing TED Talk by Chimamanda Adichie, and that's called something about avoiding the single narrative, or the danger of the single narrative. And she says the consequence of the single story is this: it robs people of dignity. So when I was a kid, the only exposure I had to gay people or LGBTQ people was rare, and it was two-dimensional. In the movies or TV, gay people were ridiculous. They were hairdressers and drag queens that were only there to tell jokes or be the butt of the joke, and were never allowed to show their humanity. And to be clear, I'm not saying that hairdressers and drag queens are ridiculous. I'm just saying that we don't get their full story because they're always a secondary character, right? So queer people were never main characters in the media that I ingested. I knew that gay people died of AIDS. And most of those images that I would see would be skinny white men. And I knew that gay people were killed by angry straight guys. And this felt very real to me because I had been physically threatened many times as a kid. So that's a dangerous narrative for someone in their formative years to know. If you go down this path of embracing who you are, you will be humiliated and you could be beaten or killed, or you could get really sick. And I didn't see gay people living joyful lives or full lives or meaningful lives. And yeah, that made an impact. And I had no one in my life, a real person that I knew who was gay. Okay, so we talked about the danger of the single narrative. I also want to talk about over-sexualization. So this is a stigma that all queer people have to deal with constantly. You know, the follow-up to, I don't have kids like that in my school is, well, I don't want to talk about gay sex. Like, I can't explain what gay sex is to my students. And I'm here to say, you don't have to. I mean, if you're in a, you know, progressive enough school that promotes sex education, that's awesome. And I think all schools should have a comprehensive sex education program. But, you know, that's not what it's all about, right? For me, it's about acknowledging the existence of queer people. In an average heteronormative environment, it is generally accepted that girls and boys like each other. So for example, if you're reading Cinderella to the class, you obviously don't need to pause to explain to the class that the prince likes Cinderella because he is sexually attracted to her and that one day they might have sex. Perhaps there's a kiss and that's as far as they go and everyone is just fine with that. So what would the difference be if the characters were same sex? So I'm just asking that you broaden that picture to include more options. I also want to give a little 101 on orientation versus identity, because they're two very different things. So sexual preference does not equal gender. So here are some examples of different orientations and different identities. And a person can be things from either column. And I also want to throw out that I'm not saying these are, this isn't like a complete list, because I mean, there are tons of ways people identify. So, but yeah, I think some hetero people that don't have a lot of exposure to queer culture are very confused about what's what. So there's orientation, which is sexual preference. Identity is who you are, right? So for example, I have some transgender friends who consider themselves straight. And that's very confusing to some people, but really it's not if you stop and think about it. Because, if, say I'm a transgender woman and I like cisgendered straight men, I might consider myself a straight woman because I'm in it's technically a heterosexual relationship to me. So just as an example, and there are people who are fluid, these things change, and it's okay that they change. And I think it's important to acknowledge, like, your experience is not going to be like everyone else's experience. So say you were born in the body that you were meant to be in, you're cisgendered, you don't know what it's like to want a different kind of body. That doesn't mean that someone else can't have a different experience from you. So anyway, again, I know I'm preaching the choir with a lot of folks, but and of course, I am imploring people not to look the other way. I experienced times when people said things to me in class, and the teacher didn't say anything. I often heard the boys will be boys kind of excuse when I would constantly encounter toxic masculinity. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to solve everyone's problems by calling out a bully, but it's important. It's important for people to know it's not okay. So those are some things that I wanted to share. But don't take my word for it. Little shout out to LeVar Burton of Reading Rainbow, which I grew up and loved so much. I sent out an email to a bunch of friends and colleagues who identify as LGBTQ+. And I asked them, what's one thing that they wish their childhood teachers knew or did? So Aaron said, I wish my childhood teachers had explicitly disrupted ideas like sameness equals safety or difference equals danger. I wish they had explicitly disrupted the idea that we should care about each other, quote unquote, despite our differences. I wish they had engaged classroom communities in understanding that dichotomies are a construction. I wish they had recognized and encouraged our enthusiasm for multiplicity. Sue says, I wasn't really sure how to answer this because I was definitely straight up into my 20s. Looking back, I realized that I was queer, but I certainly didn't know it then. This past year of remote school has been an eye-opener for me. We are lucky to have the most incredible teacher who constantly clarifies language and makes sure to be inclusive. And if he makes a mistake, he apologizes and makes room for growth. It's truly incredible to listen to all day. And it just really shows me how different a great teacher can be. He is constantly voicing and speaking with inclusive language. I think that would have been huge for so many queer people growing up. it most likely would have made space for me to even realize I was queer in the first place. I know that we live in a bubble here, but it's lovely to talk to grade school kids and have them tell me about where they fit into the alphabet. I had a child just this week tell me that they are a polygirl and pansexual. I barely even know what that means as a 43-year-old. It's incredible that these kids have access to more language without shame. Alex says, say good things about queer and trans people. Study queer and trans people whenever possible. The complete lack of it from teachers meant the only narrative was from shitty high schoolers. I think young people witnessing adults talking about queer and trans people in a positive way is profound in and of itself, because I'm guessing that's still not normal, but I'd love to be wrong. Omar says, I wish my childhood teachers did more to battle some of the negative messages that I was getting at home about being a man or boy. Any encouragement to be sensitive and be emotional would have been appreciated. I wish they fostered my caretaking instinct. I'm not saying they did the opposite, but I'm pretty sure that they were neutral about it and did very little or nothing. Michael says, the first and most important thing that comes to mind is mentioning that gay people exist. Speaking the names of historical queer figures, mixing it up when talking about boyfriends and girlfriends, and even coming out to us if they were able to. I also wish they included lessons, books, visuals, films, articles, etc., that included queer folks either as the center of the content or just in a casual way as supporting players. Catherine says, I wish they let us know that queer people existed in the real world, not just in the media. Tyrea says, using ungendered language, not pushing gender roles onto students, not assuming sexual orientations. I think that although I'm not sure how many of these things would have helped me in my personal situation growing up Christian, I definitely think these things would have at least helped me to realize that my thoughts and feelings were a lot more normal than I thought they were. Reed says, I know it was next to impossible for my closeted teachers to do this because of my conservative town, job security, internalized homophobia, external homophobia, etc., but it would have changed everything if they could have been out at school. Even my mentors at non-school programs had to be closeted. If I heard about anyone being queer, it was in hushed tones, gossip, judgments. If I had seen examples of who I could become, if I could have seen how normal and beautiful and imperfect it is, I would have known it was okay for me to be myself. It likely wouldn't have taken 22 years for me to even consider that I may be gay, because I totally super duper was. My internalized homophobia manifested as not even considering it because it wasn't a respectable or normal option. And someone shared this quote from James Baldwin with me, which is, children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but they have never failed to imitate them. And I'm, of course, referring to James Baldwin, the novelist, memoirist. I read Giovanni's Room this past year, and it completely destroyed me. So you can put that on your adult reading list. But the person who shared this quote from me, you may recognize, is the incredible Christian Robinson, who has illustrated many books, and I'm so glad is writing his own as well. And I asked Christian the same question, and he added to that. It makes me think of how important it is for teachers to be comfortable being their full selves with students and not being afraid to show all sides of themselves, perhaps part of themselves that might challenge set ideas of femininity or masculinity. When kids see adults modeling confidence and acceptance of themselves and others, I think that goes a long way to support students in being comfortable in their skin. And another illustrator author friend that I reached out to is Evan Turk. And Evan says, I wish my childhood teachers knew how important it is to incorporate LGBTQ plus people into curriculum. Authors, artists, historical figures, current activists, without their sexuality or gender identity necessarily being the focus, separate from Pride Month or social justice units. So, and I agree with what everyone has said. But yeah, just again, like destigmatizing the over-sexualization of queer people, that we are just people. And finally, I talked with Leslie Newman, who is a pioneer in LGBTQ books for youth. Her title, Heather Has Two Mommies, was released in 1989 and caused quite a stir, but it is a seminal classic now of queer literature. It remains on the banned books list, but it really made a difference. It started a conversation. It made people question things. And she's continued to add to her collection of books for queer youth and queer families, as well as telling lots of other stories. And she says, to answer your question, I grew up in the 1950s, 1960s, when gender lines were drawn in thick black magic marker and were impossible to cross. I wish my teachers had read us stories about girls like me, who had no intention of growing up, marrying a man, becoming a mom, and becoming a quote-unquote housewife. There were absolutely no other options presented to me, and since I knew that was not the life I wanted to lead, I became very depressed and thought I would remain so for the rest of my life. And to make up for that, I became the class clown and acted out a lot. Mostly, I wish my teachers had seen me and realized that, like many clowns, there was a very sad person hiding behind the humor. And Leslie really touches on something for me because I think there is a history of humor in queer culture where we've used it as a tool, sometimes as a weapon to defend ourselves. But I definitely have relied on humor to get through the really dark times. So yeah, you will often meet a queer person with a sharpened sense of humor. So I also wanted to share some resources with you and to remind you that it's not all on you, and it's very much on forming community. I think that is what makes us through. And when I finally found my community, I felt like I could finally be my honest, true self. And I'm so much happier and healthier now. But there was a long time before that happened. So the idea in creating safe spaces for queer youth, the idea of like sharing books with queer themes, they're life rafts to help, float these kids, across choppy waters until they get to where they need to be. And sometimes we can make that happen in our present communities. These are some national/international groups that you can find out more about queer culture from, or get more involved with activism for queer rights. There's GLSEN, which is the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. They focus on schools, students, teachers, campaigns like Ally Week and Day of Silence. So Ally Week and Day of Silence, those are obviously like in school demonstrations. There's PFLAG, and they're focused on LGBTQ plus parents, families, and allies, mostly advocating for queer youth. There's GLAD, and they focus on lobbying the media for LGBTQ acceptance. I think most relevant for this conversation are GSAs, QSAs, and Rainbow Clubs. And basically a GSA and QSA are student-run organizations, while Rainbow Club is educator-run. But it's about building a queer community at your school. And if you don't have a GSA or Rainbow Club at your school, I would really urge you to try to make that happen. And if you don't know how to get that started, you can go to their website, and there are people there that want to help you start that. So you can get more information. And it's important to reach out to other educators at your school, in your district. Maybe you know someone in another school that has one of these. But yeah, rely on other educators to carve out this space. I didn't have this in my school growing up. And well, okay, I'm running out of time. So I will save a story that I was going to share. But there's a GSA now, so hooray. But basically, the most important thing you can do is to take actions every day to normalize queerness. You want queerness to become a part of your lexicon so that your students feel seen. And the goal is for everyone to feel a part of the community, not be othered. And I spoke with Kieran Slattery, who is a K-5 teacher in Western Massachusetts, who's made it a mission to practice inclusivity in his classroom with race, orientation, and gender. And here are a few tips that I got from Kieran. Something that they've done in class is making an identity map. And this is a really basic one that I threw together. I've seen some pretty incredible identity maps that are fully illustrated, and people expand upon the different labels and kind of talk about it more fully. But that is a great way to share who we are with others, and show that queerness is a part of who we are, and it's not necessarily everything of who we are. And I love his story about how he was subtly able to come out to his class, which he had never done before. But it was just, just another thing that was a part of him. And now they know, right? And I think that is huge. Even though it was like a grand announcement, it's just something that they know, like, oh, okay. So for say like trans people in the classroom, they're like, oh, okay, he's like me. And then for non-trans people in the classroom, it's like, oh, okay, I know a trans person. And that's so huge, right? For a cisgendered person to walk around, to grow up knowing like, oh yeah, I know a trans person, like Mr. Slattery's awesome. Like, So yes, exposure is huge. So you can name it, explicitly name terms that refer to queerness. Try once a day using some kind of queer term. Have the words written out so they can be seen. You can keep an eye out for certain gender norms that kind of reinforce, I guess, anti-queerness. Remember that every book is actually about gender and sexuality. Some authors write with an assumption that characters are white or cis or straight, etc. So try rethinking that default. Look out for gender terms like male man and snowman. Be aware of constant reinforcements of traditional gender roles. Like even math problems can default to scenarios like Sally is baking a cake while Johnny is playing soccer, right? And the goal isn't to erase, heterosexual people or like straight people from the narrative. It's just to provide more options by maybe pausing and calling things out if you're seeing a trend. And reading is an amazing way, obviously, to explore gender, to explore sexuality, especially when you feel like you don't have the words. Someone's written the words already. So just open a book. Speaking of books, I'm going to share just a few titles because there are way many more out there. And these are kind of a collection of books that try dismantling like gender norms or represent LGBTQ people in some way. And I've read these books, so there are lots of lists. There are tons of lists of books that I haven't read yet, but I just wanted to share the ones that I already know and love. And yeah, full disclosure, I illustrated Worm Loves Worm, but I like it. And the Educator I was just talking about, Karen Slattery. Oh yeah, I have a slide coming up. But basically he and his colleague have a K-5 list that you can check out too. So as you can see, I'm kind of sharing like picture books through YA and graphic novels. But these are just some of the books that I love. And I want to give a shout out to Gender Inclusive Classrooms. That is Kieran's resource website that I was just referring to. Please check this out. They've got lesson plans, reading guides, and I just think it's so helpful. So check it out. Before we wrap up, I also want to say, before you get too excited to go be an ally, remember that it's not your job to clock who might be queer in your classroom. It's not your job to help or urge anyone out of the closet. It is your job to create a safe space for them to do so, should they choose to. Thank you, Nancy Drew. And a quick note for folks who work for religious schools or maybe are part of really religious communities. I feel the need to address you in particular because I want to acknowledge first that there are religious schools and communities that are accepting and loving to all orientations and identities. But I went to Catholic school where gender nonconformity and homosexuality were definitely not accepted. And I'm not going to get into theology and dogma with you, but if you're an educator that works at an institution that does not allow discussion of LGBTQ topics, I implore you to, at the very least, acknowledge the humanity of queer people. There's no disputing that, because it isn't just a matter of principles and beliefs. It's a matter of life and death. And I want you to please remember me. Remember that I'm sitting in your classroom and I just want to know that I'm safe. So please advocate for all youth. And please check out the Trevor Project, which is one of my charities. They do lots of suicide prevention work. They've got hotlines, resources. Please go to their website. So important. I got a lot of statistics from them. And also Camp 10 Trees, support queer joy. This is a wonderful camp that has been incredibly just a really powerful community for me and for lots of queer youth in Washington State. So with that, I want to say thank you to the EdCo Lab for having me, and I wish you all like an amazing conference, and go forth and spread the love and joy.
Thank you, Mike, so much. Online, everyone is responding, and I think the way I was sitting here quietly behind it, I'm just so moved and inspired, thankful for your own stories and also the way that you curated the voices of others. Thank you for bringing them into this morning with us as well too. And for everyone, a lot of you were responding to some of the statistics that Mike was sharing. One place that you can do a really deep dive into statistics is if you go to GLSEN, G-L-S-E-N. They have a semi-annual report that they do using surveys of students, queer students in schools, and then reporting back out their feelings, their emotions, the sorts of ways that they feel connected or disconnected to school and adults. GSAs are often talked about in the data and their role in schools. You can go so far into thinking about your own school community and what are you doing or not doing. It's incredible data and important data to look at. I just want to give a hello to those of you around the world joining us this morning. Hello to the United States, Canada, Mexico, Qatar, UAE. Hi to educators. And there's a group of you in Nigeria, it looks like, Ireland, Thailand, Poland, Jordan, the UK. Hi, Australia, though I don't know what hour of the day it is there. Hi, Colombia, Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, China, Israel, India, the Philippines, Argentina, the list goes on and on. I can't say all of you, but hello to everyone who's joining us this morning, and thank you for taking part in Mike's powerful keynote. So if you, which of course you did, if you enjoyed and were inspired by Mike this morning, please do visit his website. There you can find lots of information about his books, about him, his events, and you can contact him to perhaps invite him to speak with you, your school, or your organization. And please do follow him on all sorts of social media. There's links right on his page. That's his handle. Again, today's a day that's totally free. If you felt inspired at any point this morning or at any point for the rest of today, please take what you would normally spend on a cup of coffee at a conference or lunch, or perhaps even to register for a conference like this, which you're getting for free, and please pay that joy forward. Consider giving to the Trevor Project, to Camp 10 Trees, to Stop AAPI Hate, or to any local organization that you work with that perhaps has an affinity with the conversations that are happening across today, or some other way that you want to pay that joy forward. Monetary is great. It helps people who are doing the work to continue to do the work. But if you have other ways of donating your time, your energy, your care, or to take risks. I love Mike's points of like, use queer language, use terminology, ways that you can help to pay that forward to others. Please consider that beyond today. So right now, actually, they're just starting right now. Right now, our session 1 is beginning. Here are the 3 amazing sessions that are there. Again, you can find those links on our webpage. You can also follow us on Twitter at the Ed Collab, and you'll see all of the sessions are kind of posting across today. One thing that we'll ask of you is please do use the hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering. There were a lot of tweets, but there also was a lot of like quiet moments this morning as Mike was sharing. And I think that's because I also forgot to tweet because I was just enwrapped in what was going on. So you can also go back at any time to post to that hashtag and share what you were thinking. It's a way that you can connect to others in our community that are viewing today. And it's also ways that you can let presenters know how much you appreciated them. So please do pay the joy forward. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. And please take care. Thank you for being a part of the gathering and have a great rest of your day.